Okay, my presentation is going to be about enabling factors for climate change technology transfer to developing countries. This has become quite a hot topic, we could say, in the Technology Executive Committee. They had a thematic dialogue about this issue last week in Bangkok, where I was with Ambush presenting something very similar to what I will do today. The idea behind this is that it's an idea that Ambush has been saying, and Elaine as well, that the policies that the UNFCCC comes up to promote technology transfer, they cannot be like one-size-fits-all policies. They have to be very much adapted to the circumstances of developing countries. And I will go through this idea from a more macro perspective that they have done before, just checking the enabling factors in developing countries from a macro perspective. So to start with, why technology transfer is important. Technology transfer is very important to developing countries because they will be responsible for most of the emissions of greenhouse gases in the future. You can see this, like this is an example of scenarios developed by the European Commission that are quite similar to the ones provided by the IEA. However, even though they will be responsible for most emissions, they are very reluctant to accept caps to their emissions because they consider that their priority is still to get closer to the welfare levels that developed countries have. And in order to do this, they will have to keep on growing economically, and economic growth is very much related to energy consumption. However, caps are seen as a constraint to their development, but technology is seen as an opportunity, as you said. So they have very much pushed forward the idea of technology in the negotiations, and the developing countries were the ones that pushed for the new technology mechanism. The instruments that the UNFCCC had so far to promote technology transfer have not been very effective. If you are familiar with them, they would be like the CDM. It's not directly addressed to technology, but indirectly it has aimed to transfer technologies to developing countries. Also the TNAs, the technology needs assessments, or the previous EGTT that has been replaced by the technology mechanism, they really didn't achieve very high levels of technology transfer. And the main reasons that I would say why this kind of failure happened were firstly because these instruments were disconnected from the enabling factors that facilitate private investment. So we see that private companies are attracted by some specific factors in some countries, and they are already transferring technologies to the countries that have these enabling factors in place. However, the mechanisms of the UNFCCC were not aligned with these factors, and they were not integrated in national planning. Also, they were dealing with technology transfer from a project-by-project approach, as it happened in the CDM. So you would achieve technology transfer in a particular project, but this would not spill to the rest of the economy and remove the barriers that exist for more projects to lead to technology transfer. And also that the main incentive that the international negotiations would have, which is the carbon price that comes from the emission reduction targets, is very uncertain. And uncertainty is really the main blocking factor for private investment. So if there is not a certain carbon price, the private companies are not going to invest in projects whose main incentive would be a carbon price. Also, a main failure was that it has followed a homogeneous approach for all developing countries, so it had the same instruments for all countries, and we have, the developing world is not an homogeneous block. We have like technology active countries, like very active like China or India or Brazil, and we have countries that are not even at the level of attracting technologies to use them. So you cannot really apply the same policies, and we see that the CDM has followed the same pattern as foreign direct investment. So we see the main countries that attract the CDM are the main countries that attract investment anyway, so the UNFCCC has not filled any gaps with their instruments. And finally, there is a lack of measurements to measure how effective are their instruments to promote technology transfer. It's very difficult to measure technology, and the UNFCCC hasn't done a very good job in trying to do it. So the objective of my research, which is what this presentation is based on my doctoral research, to contribute to a better definition of instruments for technology transfer, particularly for the technology mechanism, so a definition of policies that is fitted to the characteristics of each country. And how I try to do this is first identifying which are these enabling factors that attract the private sector to invest in low carbon technologies in developing countries. assess what are their influence on of these factors in technology transfer, then analyze how developing countries perform in these enabling factors and try to map them according to their performance. And according to where they fit in their performance in these enabling factors, try to derive policy packages that are appropriate for their characteristics. So the methodology that I used, I will not go into the quantitative methodology, I just wanted to see that there is a solid method back in my research. So firstly, I identified the enabling factors, and I did this by checking the literature and also studying specific case studies. I studied 10 case studies of technology transfer in Chile particularly, and what I was analyzing is which factors were behind successful processes of technology transfer and which factors were blocking those processes that did not succeed. Then I measured technology transfer, and I used 2 multivariate analysis techniques to be able to map the countries according to their performance in these factors and to group them, which are clustering analysis and principal component analysis. So when you look at the enabling factors that are required for to promote technology transfer, I would group them in 3 categories. First of all, you have to have factors that enable a demand in the country. If there is not a demand for the technology, the process is never going to succeed. So if you create a demand artificially by like punctual subsidies, the technology is never going to grow in the country and it's not going to be successful. So there has to be a solid demand for the technology, first of all. After that, the foreign technologies have to flow into the economy. And you have to have enabling factors that allow these technologies to flow, which is what I call the economic and institutional framework of the recipient economy. Then once these technologies have flowed into the country, you need to have the appropriate capacity and infrastructure and resources in the country to actually absorb these technologies and to use them efficiently. And finally, what would be the latest stage of the technology transfer process is when the country is able to absorb these technologies and to create their own technologies. So there has to be as well a set of enabling factors that enable a country to be able to create their own technologies. So taking into account these characterizations, I came up with a long list of indicators, almost like 60 indicators, but I reduced them to a more manageable list of 24 indicators, taking into account data availability mostly, and also when 2 indicators were showing the same thing, I would choose the one that had the wider availability of data. So you can see here some examples of the enabling factors for a demand. Well, obviously is the size of the economy. Countries that have a very big economy obviously are attracting investors because they see a wide potential of growing their business and having wide profits. Also the growth of the GDP is like the prospects of growing. Another demand sign is the price of fossil fuels. So countries that have very low price of fossil fuels because they have subsidies or because they are producers, they don't have signals attracting low carbon technologies because they can just use fossil fuels much more cheaply. Another indicator is the production of fossil fuels and also indicators of policies that are in place in the country, for example, feed-in tariffs, which would be the easier to measure. Then as regards the economic and institutional frameworks that allows technologies to flow into the country, there is the ease of doing business. All these are indicators that are already collected. So the corruption perception index, also the taxes of the country, for example, or tariffs, the degree of openness of the economy. As regards the local resources and infrastructure of the country, you can see also some indicators here. I don't want to bore you like read each of them, but you can read them and see what kind of indicators will show us if a country is performing well or bad. And then finally, indicators that allow a country to produce their own technologies. This country has to have already a functioning industry. So it's very difficult to create a new industry from scratch. But it's easier when there are already competitive industries in the country and there can be what we call cross-sectoral spillover. So a new sector can learn from what has been learned in an already existing sector. So this is what I saw, for example, in Chile, where we could say the biggest industry is the mining industry. And the cases that I studied of technology transfer were very much based on local companies that had learned a lot from supplying to the mining industry, and they could use this knowledge to produce, like, for example, wind towers or blades, because they had been producing like similar things for the mining industry. So this would be the enabling factors. Then I'm going to go very fast through this, but I use principal component analysis to summarize all this information provided by the indicators to map where countries are. So for example, these two principal components summarize all the information provided by the enabling factors, and we can see at the top quadrant those countries that are expected to attract a lot of technology transfer, specifically related to low carbon. And we see here what is already happening, like there are countries like China, South Africa, or Brazil, or Turkey that are expected to attract a lot of technologies and have also the capacity to produce their own. In the second quadrant, we could see countries that are expected to attract a lot of technology transfer, but not particularly for the low carbon sector because they have very low fossil fuel prices. And there is like Saudi Arabia, the big oil producers. And then I could map at the left-hand side of the graph those countries that have very poor enabling factors and they would need more help, international help, to be able to create this good framework. Then in the cluster analysis, I used regressions to choose which factors to create the clusters with. And, well, I will go fast. So I just want to show you the groupings that I came up with using these quantitative analysis techniques. There will be like 4 types of countries who will need similar policy packages, and I gave them the following names. Firstly, what I would call the potential technology developers. They are countries that have large economies, and therefore they promise a lot of profits and a good business for foreign investors. They also have high income per capita and a good business environment that allows the flows of technologies and investment. They also have existing competitive industries, and they would have relatively low fossil fuel prices, therefore creating the appropriate demand sides. And for these good conditions, these are expected to be the main recipients of foreign technology transfer in all their steps. They also creating the capabilities to use and maintain the technologies and to develop their own technologies. What we would recommend to these countries is what successful countries in this group have already done, for example, China and India. What they have done is to create effective demand pull policies to attract investment, for example, feed-in tariffs or options for wind power, for example. Also complement this with technology push policies, which are these that enhance the knowledge in these specific technologies. We have also seen that in successful countries, temporary industrial policy works to support infant industry, and what China has done is local content requirements, or 3 minutes, or differentiated tariffs, and they are expected to need less help, less international support than other clusters. So you can see here which the members are. Then we have a second group of technology implementers who are countries relatively small, so they don't have so big a demand as the potential technology implementers, but they have relatively very good enabling factors for to attract foreign investment. And also they are countries that don't have a very well-established industry, so it's difficult for them to become technology developers in the low-carbon business. So these countries are expected to attract and implement significant levels of foreign low-carbon technology transfer, but face barriers to become technology developers. The policy recommendations for them is to focus on demand pull policies to create the appropriate knowledge by learning by doing, and then to look at what are their main competitive advantages and focus on those niches because they have limited resources due to the small size of their economies. Also, they could support demonstration projects to improve their local capacities. The third group that I call countries in need of structural changes can be defined mostly as relatively large economies, but they don't have so good enabling factors for private business investment as the technology developers are, and they are also lacking demand science because the price of fossil fuels is quite low. For these countries, the policy recommendations, well, they are not expected to attract a lot of technologies specifically because there is not a good environment for business and the price of fossil fuels is low. So we would recommend them to improve economic and institutional conditions. Also to create the right demand science by eliminating fossil fuels when they exist, which is something quite difficult to do. And, or for example, by using fossil fuel rents to support investment in clean energy technologies. Then the later group is what I call the aid recipients, countries that would need the most international support to create appropriate frameworks. And these are the countries that would require the most support from the UNFCCC, and some of the policy recommendations for this is to create the capabilities and institutions and infrastructure that is required to enable the flow of technologies, to attract the foreign aid required to create this. Also, in these countries, the deployment of small-scale off-grid technologies could work because you don't need that much work in institutions when you have technologies that reach directly to the people who need them. And then once all the appropriate institutions are available, created, implement the small-scale demand pool policies like demonstration projects to create the knowledge in the country. And this is my presentation. So yeah, it would be interesting to discuss how these differentiated policy packages could be used by the technology mechanism.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for keeping